Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to session 2 of the FootPrints Administration Ideas, Tricks, and Hacks webinar series. In today's session, we'll be going over a similar format as what we did last time. Start off with some ideas, highlights, and then go over a couple different items that I have on the screen here, and we're then shared off on the intro session. Again, my name is Nicola Room with RGR Innovations. I'm a senior consultant with FootPrints and the lead architect on the FootPrints Advanced Starter template. As usual, we're recording these sessions. These sessions will then be available afterwards. We have a link on one of my next slides here. So I work with RGR Innovations, a partner of BMC Software, founded in 2004, specializing in various enterprises along the IT sphere, myself primarily on the ITSM side, and pretty much exclusively with FootPrints for the last 8 years. So for those of you who were on our session last time on, so this is what we had covered on our last session, and you can kind of see at the bottom there in red. The recording is available at rginnovations.com/webinars. I believe you guys probably all got the email for it, but if not, there it is. And so if you were to go there, you'll see upcoming webinars we have, both, for FootPrints. We also have a Track It webinar series going on right now. So if that's of interest to you guys, you can either view those recordings or register for those. But that's our page here for all the webinars that we do, and of course, this series is always going to be available there. The recording today will be available there. Give us a couple days to spruce things up, throw it up on our website and stuff. But so probably by end of week, it'll be on our site. Okay, I apologize. I'm been sick the last several weeks there, so I'm kind of getting over it. So I'm going to be going through some cough drops and some water here. All right, so to get started on today's session, we're going to start with the ideas, highlights, and I'm going to do things a little bit differently than what I did last time here. I'm going to start with this slide over here, kind of enumerating the ideas I'm highlighting today. So you guys get to see them. You'll have the links there. I do believe we have the chat option enabled and functional this time around. So, apologize on our first session there. It's our first time. I was sharing the URLs to you guys via chat, and then of course found out later no one was getting them. So I have them on screen here. I'm going to put them in the chat as well, and then kind of go through each one of these. So I'll start off, kind of in this order here. So the first one that I want to highlight with you guys, if I go back, sorry, just over here. So first one here is allowing more options in the criteria for created by and updated by. So as you may or may not know, we have a little bit of limitations when it comes to this level of criteria, mostly as it relates to email communication. So, you might say my email business rules work fine, except, for example, if my contact on my form is an agent user as opposed to a customer user, right? Not something that would necessarily happen often, but you could have, if we take the example of the IT service desk, right? You could have an agent on the service desk submit an incident on their own behalf. So that's the most common scenario there. And unfortunately, the business logic as it exists, we can basically trigger something if a customer updates the ticket or if an agent updates the ticket. And then we assume that if a customer's updating it, it's because they're the contact. And if it's an agent updating it, we're assuming it's the assignee. But of course, we can't specifically put that out. So this is kind of what this feature request is for. And also to provide additional options. I kind of made some mock-ups, images of what I'd like to see, being able to say, hey, if it's been updated by a rule, if it's been updated by email request, which would be anytime it's updated from an email address that doesn't associate to an existing user, whether it's a customer or an agent, or if it's been updated by an importer or the system, so on and so forth. So I kind of go through the use cases there. So this is my first idea. Next one up, include BCM discovery for free in FootPrints. some of you guys may or may not know. So FootPrints, you know, if we take a step down memory lane, you know, FootPrints in the past was called FootPrints Service Core, and it had a sister product, FootPrints Asset Core. So FootPrints Service Core got renamed, or actually I should rather say FootPrints Asset Core got renamed Client Management. And so after that, BMC just dropped Service Core from the FootPrints name because at that point it was kind of redundant. And what BMC then proceeded to do is to allow BCM's discovery license to be provided for free for users of Trackit and users of Remedy Force, and to an extent, users of Remedy or Helix now. And they kind of did that with essentially all their products except FootPrints. Kind of rubs me the wrong way, but that's me. So anyways, that's what this feature request was here for. You know, added benefit to pretty much anyone, but of course we see this especially as a BMC professional services partner. We are often engaged by BMC to help transition some of their Trackit customers to FootPrints, right? Some of their Trackit customers have outgrown Trackit. Not a hard thing to do. They've outgrown Trackit. They want to go to the next step up, which is FootPrints. But oftentimes those customers are using the discovery piece of Trackit, which is client management. And then when they come to FootPrints, sometimes it's a little bit of an interesting conversation to say, yeah, it's not included for free. So that's what this feature request is here for. I'd actually had some conversations with BMC product management, and they're essentially the ones that told me create a feature request for it. So there it is. Next one up, static default filters on link controls. So you may or may not know that when you're creating a link control and you're selecting your relationship type and you're adding your grid columns, there's no way to apply a filter by default, you know, to have a default filter. So that's what this feature request here is for. This is really beneficial, especially in a scenario of, you know, I'm on my incident form and Adam is calling into the service desk and he's got an issue. So I open up an incident ticket. I put in Adam's information, I work the ticket, maybe I solve the issue on the phone right then and there, right? And if I'm putting in my my little white gloves there and I want to provide some extra service, I might say, hey, Adam, let's look up what other tickets you have open right now and let's see if we can work on those, right? So traditionally, you would do that by then opening up the user's contact form straight from the incident form. So you're on the incident form, you go to your contact section, you open up the contact record, and there's a link control for related tickets. And it would be nice to only show the ones that are still open. However, because we don't have static default filters, that link control shows you all the tickets. So if this contact has existed for years at your organization and submitted hundreds of tickets, you know, you kind of have to scroll all the way to the bottom to get to the open stuff. So that's what this feature request here is for. Next one, and you know, I'm looking at the list of attendees here, and I know a few of you guys have talked to me personally about this one. Being able to hide that search knowledge base link at the top of the public notes or description field. You know, that button there, that link is nice if you are using the knowledge base for that particular form or process item that you've created. However, if you're not using the knowledge base and you want it to go away, you can't. And then of course, the alternative might be to create a nuke field. However, then if you want to do email integration, right, to be able to send an email in to update the ticket and then update the ticket to send an email out, you have to rely on the out of the box field, which includes the link. So, you know, pick your poison there. So that's what this feature request here. Really fingers crossed, hoping they can do this. A very easy one. We've actually seen BMC do a very similar implementation recently, I believe about 2 versions ago, when they finally gave us the ability to remove the customize button on consoles. So same concept here. We just like the ability, you know, I'm kind of envisioning this as you're editing your description field, and you know, on the administration side, you're editing that field, and there's a checkbox that says, you know, show knowledge base link, and if you uncheck it, it goes away. And that would also help with one of the main reasons this one often comes up is A, I'm not using the knowledge base, but B, if I have 2 fields side by side, like what we have with the FootPrints Advanced Starter template out of the box, right? We have the public notes field on the left, the internal notes field on the right. The public notes field on the left has that knowledge base link to it. So it's a few pixels lower than the other field. And so for people that are a little OCD like I am, you want your fields to line up, you can't make them. And then the last one, save relationships in link controls as soon as the link is, as soon as it's added, rather than waiting for the save. So if you're linking anything, an incident to a contact, an incident to a change request, an incident to a CI, whatever that you're using in the link controls, unlike many other tools with FootPrints, that link, that connection is only saved once you save the ticket. So if you're just opening up a ticket to link it to something else, you have to open up the ticket, do the link, and then press save. And of course, if you forget to press save, and I believe this part here is a defect, but you won't even get a pop-up saying, hey, there's unsaved changes, but it won't stick. So that's what this is here for. So hopefully you guys can relate to some of these. So what I'm going to do now here is I'm just going to quickly go into chat here, and I'm going to drop in all of the URLs here for you guys to be able to vote on them. If I kind of covered this on session 1, this is all on BMC's community website, which is their user group for all their products, in this case for FootPrints. You do need to have an account in order to post or vote on these things on community. Should not be an issue, because I would imagine everyone, or at least everyone on the call who's the product administrator of FootPrints, you already have an account with BMC, because that's how you go and download your latest version. So it's the same account, but you can use those links to then vote up on those ideas. Like I mentioned on session 1, BMC uses these ideas as a metric, as a guide for what features to implement into FootPrints. It is by no means the only metric they use, but it's the one that is driven by the community. So this is where you can have your voice heard. All right, so I'm going to jump into my first item for today, and actually apologize. Let me go back to my slide here and kind of just quickly shoot back here. So you guys, I think I kind of skimmed this through pretty quick. So we've done the ideas highlight. So now the items I want to talk about today: the ticket data model, third-party reporting best practices, continual improvement, and then I'm hoping to open up to a little bit of a Q&A at the end here. So we have the chance to, you guys should be able to see on your interface somewhere, there's a chat function, and just to the left of that, there's a Q&A function that you guys can then ask some questions. And that function is there right now. So feel free to, if you have any questions, to start kind of populating that Q&A, and towards the end of the webinar here, I'll get to those. So I'm going to start off with the ticket data model, kind of a continuation to what we talked about in session 1, where I did the high-level overview of the database and kind of talked about how BMC had its own data model for the FootPrints application itself, but not really covering tickets, because of course when you install FootPrints, it's a blank canvas for you to design how you want. So BMC cannot provide you a data model for something that hasn't been designed yet, right? And so normally what would have to be done is you design your system your way, assuming that you're not using the FootPrints Advanced Starter template. You design the system your way, and then it's kind of up to you to figure out the database, create your own data model. With the FootPrints Advanced Starter template, we have created our own data model, which is provided as part of that package. That's what I'm going to put up on screen here in a minute. It's specifically for the FootPrints Advanced Starter template. It's also specifically for incidents within that. However, pretty much everything is the same across any kind of workspace ticket. And then you can even, with a little bit of understanding, you can even adapt it to anything else. Address books, CMDB, service portfolio, knowledge base, etc. So if I pull this up on screen here, so that's a giant spider web of a data model that we have created here. Might look a little bit overwhelming to start off with. I'll kind of start with a quick overview. I've tried to color code things, and I've got this legend up over here kind of explaining it. I've included everything in here. So a lot of things you might not care about to to query for whatever purposes you're using the query, whether it's just you want to write a query, you want to do some third-party reporting, etc. So down in the green over here in the middle is really going to be, what I call kind of the primary information. So anything related to the ticket you're reporting. So like I said, in this case, it's incident. So everything directly related to incident is going to be in this green stuff here. And then secondary in the yellow, in the light blue is going to be mostly relationships. This ticket is related to what? So I got examples, problem, contacts. In red down over here is audit information. So, which is the history, right? At the bottom of your form, the ticket history. That's all in these tables over here. So I know, some of you guys, we've talked in the past, hey, how do I do this? And I say it's like a spider web of 5 different tables kind of mishmashed together. That's these ones over here. Left-hand side here in the orange, we have voting information, right? The approval engine. So if you're not reporting on, for example, change management, well, you can omit these ones. Of course, if you don't want to report on the audit history, you can omit these ones here. So what you want to report on is really going to depend on, or how much of this you need is really going to depend on what you're looking to get out of it. So if I zoom in on this, and we have sort of like example SQL in here that you can use to kind of reference, and everything is kind of color coded as to what relates to what. Everything is driven by backend IDs, which are separate from the front-facing ticket numbers, and they usually do not have the same number as well. So don't make that assumption here. You can kind of see how things are joined from one to the next here to get you where you want to go. I do have my email. Well, on the registration, you guys have my email. If you would like a copy of this data model, please send me an email and I can get you a copy to this. Like I said, this is mainly geared for incidents in the FootPrints Advanced Starter template, but you can leverage this for anything, right? So if I don't want to do incidents, well, maybe I go to a different table name or something like that. But the key, the keys between tables and all that stuff and how everything connects is the same, regardless of what workspace ticket you're talking about. And for the most part, outside of workspaces as well. So like I mentioned, CMDB, address book, knowledge base, etc. Some of the key highlights in here. So if we're looking at incidents, so this is my main incident table. This is going to be my starting point. This contains pretty much everything except for three main pieces of information. One, assignments, which are stored in a separate table. So any assignee fields and the data within, separate table. And this is a single table for the entire FootPrints environment. So whether it's a workspace ticket in one workspace, in a different workspace, in the knowledge base, in the CMDB, et cetera, they're all here. So joining this kind of gets a little bit complicated, but again, the examples are there. Second one, journalized entries. So those would be any of those rich text fields that you have the checkbox for journaling enabled, which out of the box is the description field. Or in the FootPrints Advanced Starter template, the public notes and the internal notes are stored in here. They're also stored in here. The latest entry is stored in here, but all the historical data as well as the latest one is also stored in here. So if ever you want to run a report and say, I want to spit out, when I talk about reports, I should clarify, I'm talking about third-party reporting. I'm not talking about service analytics here. You have to join to this table over here. So those are the main two. And then the third one relates to, for example, created by, right? Who created the ticket? You can see it's a number, 201 here. So 201 translates to a user, but of course you got to do that join. So I got to come over here to my users table, find out who user 201 is. There's his login ID. And then if some organizations have login IDs that are not really readable, an employee ID or a badge number or something like that. So if you want to then extrapolate that further down, you can go basically up this tree over here to then find the username. So that's pretty much most of what I wanted to show on the data model. I appreciate it. It probably looks a little bit overwhelming here. Once you kind of dip your feet in, it gets easier. And this kind of segues nicely into my next topic, which is third-party reporting best practices. So Third-party reporting is something that, at least when it comes to our own clients, so the clients that RJR Innovations supports, we have a lot of our clients that do leverage third-party reporting for a plethora of different reasons, right? Could be that they're already doing that in-house with either their existing ITSM solution when they came to FootPrints, or just in general, or service analytics didn't meet the needs that they had, whatever the case may be. Third-party reporting is a very popular thing to do, again, regardless of whether it's FootPrints or not. Because, for example, everyone that comes to FootPrints from Trackit is already doing third-party reporting, because Trackit does not have a reporting engine. It leverages, or at least old Trackit. So Trackit was rewritten similar to FootPrints. FootPrints was rewritten from scratch 8 years ago. Trackit was rewritten from scratch 2 years ago. The version prior to the rewrite did not have reporting built in. It leveraged Crystal Reports. Crystal Reports is a third-party product, similar to Power BI, SQL reporting services, Tableau, ClickView, etc. You just point it to a SQL database. So now with the data model here, you have the information necessary for that. The one thing I would point out, and like I said, this segues into the next discussion topic for today's session, which is third-party reporting best practices. And this also ties into potentially integrations. If you want to do, for example, you want to do an integration between FootPrints and, let's say, your asset information in wherever your asset information is, Microsoft SCCM, Dell Case, not FootPrints, not client management, because of course there is a native integration there, but anything else. Instead of creating your reports using, if you see how complex this is, imagine what the SQL query with all the joins is going to look like. So best practice on your third-party reporting, do not use large SQL queries on tables with complex joins. There might be some performance impacts to there or benefits depending on how you're writing your query, but for the most part, it's just overly complex. And then as you're building extra reports or having to modify reports, you then have to kind of remember what your giant query, look like, and what, all your nicknames on your aliases for columns and stuff. So what I strongly recommend is you take this data model, you take that SQL query you've created, you create yourself a view in the database, and then you run your reports off of that view. So as an example, within the FootPrints Advanced Starter template, if I go to my VMs over here, so I have, we have the tables, and then in the views, I have created some views in here, including, for example, this one here. So this view here, all I have to do is run select off of that one, and it gives me pretty much most of the relevant information from here in here, right? So I have everything looking nice and neat. To show you, for example, there's the assignee information. So I don't have what you would have seen in the data model. I don't know if I have the column in here. Actually, sorry, in here. If I look at, this is ID 1231, right? So if I look at 1231 in here, I actually have 4 rows in here, because I have across 2 different assignee fields, the primary assignee field and the assignees field, I have 4 different people across those fields. So now, with creating a view, you can just have something very quick and nice. And then same thing when it gets to things like the created by information, right? Instead of having that number that you then have to join to another, right? So if you put everything in a view, it makes your reporting so much easier, because then all you have to do is just report on that view. And depending on your organization, depending on your capabilities, you as the FootPrints administrator might not be the reporting expert, right? So if you're using Tableau in your organization, you might not be the one writing the Tableau report. Someone else is doing that. And then of course they'd have to work hand in hand with you to say, give me the SQL query to do this. Oh, I need you to tweak it because it's, so if you just say, here's the view, go run your report off of that, it makes things a heck of a lot easier. So that's my my best practice piece on that one for third-party reporting. And like I mentioned, it also applies to some integrations. Like if you wanted to do a CMDB integration, a CI import to an external, SQL source, go to a view instead of going to a table. My next item for today is one that's near and dear to my heart, is continual improvement. So this is something that we see very, very often. I've been working at RJR since 2010. I started off on support, moved over to consulting pretty quick. I started off doing some consulting with BMC Remedy Force. I then switched over to BMC Service Desk Express. And then, of course, in 2012, 2014, when BMC end of life Service Desk Express for FootPrints, I transitioned to FootPrints. And one of the things that I've seen time and time again, both with prospects that I've done demos with, or discovery calls, or sometimes even our own clients, or certainly answering RFPs, time and time again, we see we're looking for a new product. The product we currently have doesn't meet our needs. And then when you kind of drill into that, especially if it's I've seen some RFPs where they're looking to get off of FootPrints. Of course, it always saddens me to see that, but of course, you can outgrow FootPrints, just like you can outgrow, almost any tool. But oftentimes I will see, whether it was FootPrints or sometimes I would see Remedy Force or Service Desk Express, one of those products I've worked with. And okay, what are your pain points with that product? And there's certainly some legitimate pain points with any of those products, right? No product is ever perfect. But oftentimes the pain points were, well, the form is just clunky, or we don't like our categorization, or our reporting's a mess, or the business, essentially the pain points oftentimes were more related to the way the product was configured versus the product itself. And that's always, whether it's FootPrints or any product, that's always a painful situation to witness, because here you have an organization looking to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not more, to switch to a different product when they could save all of that money and just improve their existing product. And that's continual improvement, right? We've seen this time and time again. Again, regardless of the product, pretty much, where the story often repeats itself, right? You have a client, an organization, they implemented a product 10 years ago. Their admin left 7 years ago. And so they've essentially been on life support ever since then, because instead of like retraining a new admin, they basically said, hey, Joe, you're the one that's got the most experience, right? Congratulations, you're the new admin. And Joe, the only thing he can do, because of course Joe has his own work to do as well, right? So the only thing he can really do in whatever the tool is maybe create a new user, remove a new user, maybe do some minor like UI tweaking, maybe add a field here, do some very simple business logic. And of course, fast forward 6 years, to the present time in this particular example here. And then they're like, yeah, this tool just not meeting our needs. We haven't upgraded it in 6 years. And the root cause has just been, you haven't been keeping up with the system. ITSM tools are highly configurable pieces of software, unlike something like, for example, Exchange, right? We often hear in organizations, Exchange is this very important thing, right? If email goes down, it's the end of the world. So we've got this highly elaborate team of people working on Exchange. But day to day, there's not a whole, there's not a lot of configurability to it or something like that. Versus an ITSM tool, there's a lot to do. And oftentimes it's kind of looked upon as a, we'll get to it if we can, or if the, whatever the case. So continual improvement. Once you go live with your implementation, which of course I'm assuming everyone on the call here is actively using FootPrints in their environments, but once you've gone live with it, it doesn't end, right? As a successful FootPrints administrator, or administrator of any tool, really, you should be constantly on the lookout for new versions. And then when there are new versions, read the release notes, put them in your test environment, try them out. Certainly for our clients, anytime there's a new release of FootPrints, I do my own little blurb out to our clients. Here's the new highlights, here's the new bug fixes, here's potentially the newly introduced defects. I don't like saying that, but it happens with any tool pretty much. So that's the first thing. Keep up with the version of your product. Second thing is let's assume that in your environment, you're using FootPrints for IT, service desk, you're using it for HR, you're using it for facilities, and you're using it for asset inventory. Periodically, once a month, reach out to the teams, reach out to the service desk manager, reach out to the HR manager, facilities manager, the CMDB manager, reach out to those people and say, hey, how's FootPrints working for you? Is there any issues? Is there things you'd like me to change, right? Do you need a new field added to the form? Is there something that's not working properly, right? Things like that. Oftentimes, the stories I've heard from, whether it's current and past clients, and I mean, I administrate some tools at RJR myself, and I kind of hear the same thing, right? Oftentimes, your users will not come to you as the FootPrints administrator. They will not come to you and say, gosh, I wish I could do this in FootPrints, or I'm having this problem here. They will usually go to their managers. Their managers will then go up the chain, come back down to your manager, and then you're hearing it from above, and you're like, oh, I never heard of this before, right? And unfortunately, you can't say, you can't really say, well, they never talked to me, so it's their fault, right? You, as the administrator, should be reaching out to your users, to your stakeholders, and say, how's it going, right? You can also use that same that same philosophy to, hey, I know that the HR guys are not using FootPrints. They're not really using a ticketing system. Maybe I can bring them into FootPrints, right? Maybe I can introduce them to a ticketing system, or maybe they're using a different tool. See if maybe you can absorb them in here. That way you don't have to pay maintenance on 2 different products or something like that. So continual improvement. On that note, again, part of the FootPrints Advanced Starter template, but of course you could build this in your own environment easily. So we have continual improvement as part of it. And continual improvement, believe it or not, is actually a practice of ITIL. So just like incident, problem, change, release, service desk, etc., continual improvement is another practice of ITIL. But it's one of those that is pretty much always forgotten about. And so we have continual improvement here. And essentially what this is a mini ticketing system between the agents of FootPrints and the administrator or administrators of FootPrints. So all of the agent users in our design here, if I were to log in as a, my service desk agent demo user here, you guys have probably seen, some of you guys anyways, have seen this demo a few times or whatnot. If I log in, he's got his service desk hat, he's got his list of open tickets. They all have access to continual improvements. So over here, they can come in and say, I'd like a new field on the form, right? They can create a ticket and send that over to the administrator, similar to how you might, send them an instant chat or an email or cross them down the hallway, in the before times when we were all in offices and things like that. So this is just a more formal way to do it so that the administrator, basically has their own list of here's some improvements to do. So if I go back as the admin over here and I go to new again, there it is. So this is the most important part of any successful implementation of an ITSM product, be it Trackit, FootPrints, Remedy, ServiceNow, Sharewell, etc. Right? You can't just roll it out, deploy it, and then kind of just let it sit there, right? You have to continuously update it. Hopefully I've beaten that one to a pulp there. Like I said, very near and dear to my heart because we see too many times RFPs and things of that nature where people are looking to get off of a product where the main pain points aren't the product itself, but rather the implementation. So that brings us to the last 10 or so minutes of our segment over here, which is the Q&A. So hopefully you guys can access the Q&A. Raise your hand if you can, I guess, or something, but please feel free to shoot any questions about whether it's anything on the survey, or sorry, anything on the session from today, or really any other, whether it was last week's session or any other topics, if, kind of a little free for all for you guys here.
Sonia, you had your hand up. Did you have a question?
Hi. No, I didn't have a question. Nick said raise your hand if you can see the chat. So that's why I
Oh,
was raising hand.
oh, okay.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you, Sonia. First time doing the Q&A part, so I'm pretty sure
No,
I
this is good.
but as a panelist, as a host, I see a slightly different interface than you guys. William has a question. Advice on implementation issues without paying high consulting fees. So certainly the first thing you can do, William, is, or really anyone, right? So if ever you guys have any questions on your implementation, right? Even if you're not a client of ours necessarily, you have my email. Feel free to shoot me an email. Give me, a synopsis of what your issues are, or we can maybe set up like a quick half-hour introductory call. Go over some of those issues, and we can kind of work it from there, depending on what those issues are. So if those implementation issues are, hey, I'm getting an error on the screen, or something like that, I'd redirect you to your support provider. Now, of course, some of you guys on the webinar, we're your support provider, so basically call us. Or William, I don't know if you're direct with BMC or whatnot, so it might be a case of, hey, work with them. Of course, if ever you're working with your existing support provider, you're not satisfied, absolutely, the door is open, contact us. I'm not saying I can give you guys free support, but I am saying, that I can chat with you guys and see if there's anything that we can do. Certainly the way we like to do our implementations, when it comes to the original implementation of footprints into an environment, of course, we strongly recommend you have to get implementation, consulting services to do the implementation. But part of that also includes a full 5-day administrative course, because we want you guys to be self-sufficient afterwards, right? And not having to come back to your consulting partner to say, hey, I want to do problem management now. Please send me the bill. We want to avoid that, right? We want you guys to be self-sufficient. So William, I don't know if you want to go into more specifics now, or like I said, you got my email. If you want to shoot me an email, we can see, what we can do. Next one, Emilio, is continual improvement part of what we should have, or is it a new workspace? Okay, so continual improvement, like what I'm showing on the screen right now, I believe I did. Oh, my spot. Let's resume that case. So continual improvement is part of the Footprints Advanced Starter template. It has been part for years. Emilio, I know we implemented you guys, I don't know, 5-6 years ago now. It should be there. I can certainly, contact you later. We can take a look. I'm expecting it's probably there, but of course, it being a separate, right? So if I were to just, quickly go back as my administrator here, right? Continual improvement is just essentially another container item, right? So odds are it's probably there, but my guess is, none of your users have access to it. None of your agent users have access to it. So it might just be a matter of giving them permission for that. But we can certainly take that offline after the webinar and dig in more. Does anyone else have any other questions? Okay, so we're pretty much at time. I like to keep these webinars around the 40-45 minute mark. We're at the 40-minute mark here. So certainly if anyone's got any other questions, I'm going to stay on for another little bit here. Feel free to chime in with some questions. If not, pretty much the end now. We do have, I will be sending out the email for the registration for session 3 of this webinar series, which will occur on January the 11th again at 2 p.m. Along with the topics there. So as usual, I have some ideas highlight. I got about 5 or so ideas as well to chime in with. I'm also going to be talking about email marker lines, Tomcat URL redirects, and footprints license usage tracking. Now, at the end of this webinar, similar to the first one, there's going to be a survey. I really appreciate you guys filling that out. Lots of great stuff that we got last time. A lot of you guys, expressed interest in both data model, database, reporting kind of around that. So I'm going to try to incorporate more of those topics into some of the future sessions. So session number 3 is pretty much planned out. I might tweak a few things. I'm not sure yet. Session number 4, which I'm currently slating for February 8th. I'll try to incorporate more topics there. And of course, like I said, you guys have my email contact there. So if ever you guys have any questions sort of out of the blue, feel free to send me an email. Joke had a question. Let's see the data model. Yeah, absolutely. So I'll put it back up on the screen. Like I said, if you send me an email, I will send you a copy of the data model, essentially this, which is essentially just a PNG here that I've made. Did you have a specific question, Joke, around which area of the data model you wanted more details on? And I believe you have the ability to unmute yourself. So if you'd rather just use your voice, and we can do that. So I see you've unmuted yourself, but I don't know if you're trying to talk or. Okay, no worries. So feel free to type it in if it's easier, or if not, you can shoot me an email afterwards. So we're pretty much at time. Jacques, I'm not sure if you're typing. Oh, you are. There you are. Okay, so I get to that. I was gonna say, if you guys want to drop, feel free. I'm gonna stay on for a little bit here. See. All right. So I just want to know exactly what you pull and culminated views around assignments. Always been a challenge for me in SQL side. Appears your hopefully assignments. Yeah. So especially around things like the assignments, right? Assignments and journalized entries are kind of tricky because you might have one incident record, one incident row, sorry, that yields multiple rows in the journalized entries or multiple rows in the assignee fields. And that can get tricky to do. And I'm by no means a SQL expert. I'm kind of self-taught over the last decade or so. W3 schools, Google, Stack Exchange, they help immensely. There's a couple different ways you can achieve that in SQL. Using the stuff function and a couple other things like that to essentially wrap multiple assignees into one row. I don't know if I have an example of that in here. Maybe at some point. Let's get rid of this top 1000. This is all my imported data. Ooh, I might have an example in here. I do not have an example, but they would show up one row with like a column, comma, or I forget exactly what syntax I chose to delineate the two of them. But yeah, they would show up like that. It is a little bit tricky, and that's where some either Googling around, reaching out to if you've got a DBA or something like that. Whenever it comes to training administrators for an ITSM tool, again, regardless of whether it's FootPrints or anything else, I adopted the same philosophy with FootPrints as I did when I was doing services for Service Desk Express, and almost the same as I was doing Remedy Force. Remedy Force being a SaaS solution, didn't have access to the database, so that was a little bit different. But part of my training includes the database, and part of my requirements for a successful administrator includes basic SQL knowledge, basic Windows administration knowledge, being able to work Excel spreadsheets, things of that nature, because those are sort of the fundamental pillars that a successful admin needs, right? Because if someone's going to say, hey, I need some custom reporting or something like that, you might be the one that has to do it, and you might need to have some of that knowledge and experience. And definitely, especially if you have a test system. But of course, writing a SQL select statement is generally, there are some exceptions, but is generally safe even in a production environment, right? Usually the exception to that is if you write some kind of a SQL select statement that's really poorly written, or doing some bad joins or something, and then you end up blocking your tables. So, be careful. If you have a test system, which all of you guys should, definitely go that route, and then just play around, whether it's using something like the data model, the data model as a reference, or just trying to, write some select statements, try to do some funky things. Google is your friend, right? Google, SQL substring, SQL char index, SQL replace, whatever you want, and whether it's W3 schools, Stack Exchange, Stack Overflow, sometimes Microsoft's website, or anywhere else. There's plenty of places that you can find the information. The most important thing I can say on that is, once you create that SQL query of yours and you're very proud of it, save it somewhere, date it, put a date on it, put sort of like some notes on what it does, save it somewhere, because any other time you want to write a SQL query, and I still do it even after 10 years of this. If I want to write something I know it's going to be fairly complex, I go back and look at what I've written in the past and kind of use that as a springboard to then do whatever it is I need to do. Okay, so we're pretty much at time here. I'm going to maybe give it another minute in case there's a last minute question, and if not, we're going to end the session here, and we'll see you guys next month, or next year, I suppose. December already. So yeah, hope you guys have a great holiday season, and yeah, we'll see you next year, I guess. So give it another minute here, and thank you, Jacques. Appreciate that. Okay, well, thank you very much for attending, and see you guys next year. All right, bye now.